For more on a host of topics from Capitol Hill, I'm joined by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Senator, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Welcome back to Special Report. We want to talk about the Brett Kavanaugh hearings and other things. First, I want to ask you about this anonymous op-ed in the New York Times titled, "I'm part of the resistance inside the Trump administration," said to be a senior Trump administration official, adding, quote, in this op-ed, "It may be cold comfort in this chaotic era, but Americans should know that there are adults in the room. We fully recognize what is happening, and we are trying to do what's right, even when Donald Trump won't." Your thoughts on this?
Well, I had not seen this piece until your setup at the beginning of this show. So therefore, I really have nothing to say about it, other than I think it's important for the American people to know, if you're one of the American people who are right of center, it's been an extraordinarily productive Congress. From Supreme Court justices, circuit judges, regulatory changes, tax reform. We've had an extraordinarily accomplished Congress, and that's what our meeting down at the White House was about, finishing up this year's fiscal year business.
Right, and you did meet with the president today, with House Speaker Paul Ryan. This op-ed suggests that despite his leadership style, these successes are happening. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's been a good team. Yeah, the president has been interested in the things that we wanted to pursue. We've been on the same wavelength on all of those issues: taxes, regulations, Supreme Court justices, circuit judges, all of those issues. We've been in the same place. He signed them into law. And I said, if you're an American out there who prefers the country right of center, there hadn't been a better Congress in the time I've been in the Senate.
His attitude today, I mean, it was in the wake of, obviously, the Bob Woodward book and his reaction to that. Then you had this anonymous op-ed. Your interaction today? Yeah,
we were talking about finishing the people's business before the end of the fiscal year. We have 3 conference reports on appropriation bills. Sounds maybe boring to your audience, but if 9 out of 12 of those are signed into law before the end of September, that will not have happened since 1997, over 20 years ago. Completing a farm bill. America in general is in good shape. Agricultural America is not. And we're intent on finishing this farm bill, getting it signed before the farm bill expires at the end of September. Those are the things that we were focusing on.
Last thing on this, are you worried that there are people inside this administration that are essentially trying to bring this president down?
Look, my job is to try to achieve as much for the American people as I can. You know, these Republican governments don't come along very often. Not many Americans know this, but you can go back 100 years, only 20 of the 100 years did the Republican Party have the White House, the House, and the Senate at the same time. We don't want to squander that opportunity. I think we've done a lot for the American people, and we're going to do a lot more before the end of the year.
I don't want to belabor this point, so move on to today. There was an effort by your counterpart, Senator Schumer, to kind of slow things up on this Kavanaugh hearing. Take a listen.
And the Republican majority is deliberately obstructing the Senate's constitutional duty to fairly and thoroughly conduct our advise and consent powers. So,
order in the chamber.
As a result, we will not consent to business as usual on the Senate floor today.
So not to get too much in the weeds, but explain what that was all about.
Well, what he was trying to do is to shut down the Judiciary Committee hearing. We simply adjourned the Senate to prevent him from doing that. You've seen the antics in committee. Your station has been, your network has been carrying it, all the hooting and hollering and misbehavior. Look, none of that's going to make any difference. The president has nominated an all-star. I went to law school, but I wasn't much of a lawyer. But I can recognize a great lawyer when I see one, and Brett Kavanaugh is a great lawyer. He's going to be confirmed. He's going to be confirmed before the end of September and be on the court when it starts its next session, the first Monday in October.
To Senator Schumer's point, the complaint really is about the documents that have been upheld. Some came out late, 42,000. Some have fall under executive privilege from the Bush administration. Response to that complaint?
Well, more paper has been produced for this nominee than any nominee in history. We have 12 years of decisions on the D.C. Circuit which are directly related to his nomination. Every one of these people screaming about getting more papers have already announced they're going to vote against him. What else do they need to know? They're already against him. So this is a smokescreen. You know, when you hear people arguing about process, you know they got nothing else. And with Brett Kavanaugh, there's really no good argument not to confirm him.
You complain, though, about the Democratic tactics pushing back against Kavanaugh, but what about Merrick Garland? Mm-hmm. And wouldn't you have thrown a fit if Democrats treated a GOP nominee the way you treated Garland?
Look, I was quoting Joe Biden in 1992, who said if a vacancy occurred in the middle of the presidential election, they wouldn't fill it. Democratic Senate, Republican president. Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid said 18 months before the end of the Bush years, if a vacancy occurred in the presidential year, they wouldn't fill it. I knew if the shoe was on the other foot and we had a vacancy nominating a Republican president to a Democratic Senate in the middle of a presidential election year, they wouldn't fill it. Listen, that was simply not going to happen. I said the American people ought to weigh in on this lifetime appointment, and whoever they chose, and most people at the time I made that call thought it was going to be Hillary Clinton. Whoever was being elected in the middle of that year ought to make that decision. That's what happened. The Democrats lost.
You kept the Senate in session for part of August to handle spending bills at the president's request. You made the most progress, as you mentioned, on spending bills in 20-plus years. Why wouldn't the president torch this up because there's no money for a wall? I mean, is that still a possibility that this thing all comes crashing to a halt?
No, the 9 bills that we're going to put on his desk before the end of September, which is the end of the fiscal year, deal with other substance, but it also 90% of the federal budget will have been approved before the end of the fiscal year. And as you pointed out, that hadn't happened since 1997. We still are in favor of the wall. We still want to get funding for the wall. But we think the best time to have that discussion is after the election.
This is the Fox News Alert. President Donald Trump not finished commenting on the New York Times anonymous op-ed. He made some statements earlier, but now just tweeting one word with a question mark. Treason, obviously referring to whoever wrote that op-ed. We're here with the Senate Majority Leader. Treason?
I don't have any observation to make on this episode.
But last thing, I mean, for someone to write and to be quoted in Bob Woodward's book and to then write someone else, perhaps, the root of the problem is the president's amorality. Is that a problem for this administration?
Look, I would like the American people to judge the results that we've achieved in the last 2 years, and we're not through. And I'd like to focus on our accomplishments, of which I think there are an enormous number.
No chance government shutdown?
No chance of a government shutdown.
Zero?
Zero.
In March, the president threatened not to sign the anonymous bill at the last minute, even though he had negotiated it. Do you worry that you may have an agreement on government spending and then, poof, you don't?
No, I don't worry about that. We had a good discussion today. I expect him to sign these 9 bills into law. That'll fund 90% of the government for the first time in 20 years before the end of the fiscal year. And then I expect us to do a short-term continuing resolution for the balance of the funding and then have the discussion about how to fund the wall after the election.
Has the ship sailed on repeal and replace Obamacare? Now you have Senator John Kyle in the position of the late Senator John McCain, who obviously voted no on that. Senator Kyle perhaps would vote yes. Is repeal and replace that ship gone for this year?
For this Congress, it would be difficult to achieve. I think whether we can achieve it later depends upon the results this fall, and the American people have a chance to decide what kind of Congress they want to have going into the next 2 years.
What are Republicans running on? It doesn't seem a totally unified message. No, is there one?
Well, I think the economy. I mean, it's a red-hot economy. I think the policies of this administration and Congress have made a huge difference, whether it's a tax reform or regulatory relief. The country is booming. These are record numbers that we're producing on unemployment, on growth. That makes a huge difference in the lives of people all across our nation. And that's a result of this Republican government. So we think we have plenty to run on. Not to mention the fact that we're transforming the courts. 2 Supreme Court justices, 26 new circuit judges, making a difference in the lives of every litigant in the country when they go to court.
The president has not been shy about talking out and tweeting out about his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who you know very well. He's been very aggressive in recent days on that front. The vice president just today was asked about it, and he said this, quote, "I hold Jeff Sessions in the highest regard. I appreciate his service to the nation." So are you with Vice President Pence or President Trump on this?
I can speak for myself. I'm a big supporter of Jeff Sessions. I think he's done a good job, and I hope he stays right where he is.
You think he will?
We'll find out.
We just finished the memorial services, obviously, for John McCain. Tell us about your last conversation with Senator McCain and your emotions as this week came to an end, this past week.
I went out to see him in May, and we had an opportunity to relive old battles. We were on the opposite side of many, many issues, and then on the same side of others. And I was pleased that I had a chance to say goodbye. John loved a good fight, and I did too. And we had a pretty big one that went on for 10 years and ended up in the Supreme Court. We expressed our love for each other.
That's campaign finance, obviously.
Yeah. Love for each other, and it was a perfect way to say goodbye.
So wrapping this up, spending farm bill, opioid abuse prevention, FAA reauthorization?
Opioids, I think we're very close to having another strong bipartisan opioid bill. We'll get FAA reauthorized. Again, it's a steady stream of accomplishments in this Congress.
Senator, we'll continue to follow. We appreciate your time.
Thanks.